Hello everyone, welcome to this video. During this video I'll be interviewing graduate of ISU of DP program. He is an American student who is now studying here in Netherlands, and we will talk about different topics such as skills that he gained and maybe some hard choices that he had to make during the school life. So I hope that this video will be helpful to NYP students and maybe current DP1 students maybe. So let's just get to it.
Introduce yourself. Who are you? Maybe who you work as, when was your date of graduation or final exams? That would be perfect to hear.
Yeah, I'm William Weibel. I moved from the United States to the Netherlands in 2017, I believe. So I did the IB for 1.5 years. I joined midway through DP1 and I graduated in May of 2018. That was exciting. It was challenging. It was my first time in a really international environment, to be honest. So that was also quite a culture shock. I liked it though. Um, but yeah, it's been then 7 going on 8 years since I've graduated. But yeah, I right now I work at the Dutch Ministry of Finance. Between graduation and working for the Dutch Ministry of Finance, I did my bachelor, did my master, and worked a lot of different jobs to try to find out what I like doing. And yeah, now my life is quite stable in the Netherlands, and I'm happy with that.
Okay. Do you think that there was much change? That's gonna be out of my context, the question that I sent to you, but uh, did much change from the school that you had in US and the international school in Utrecht?
Absolutely. So, in my first 2 years of my American high school, I would say that things were quite rigid and there wasn't a lot of room for individual responsibility. So it was quite easy in that regard. There was a lot of work to do. So that was also similar to IB. But you had the same classes at the same time every day with the same people. There was no changing of schedules for the most part. It was just very, you're there from a certain time to a certain time, and there's no room for independent study. On top of that, I think we had daily homework, which was largely just doing worksheets, and it felt very much like we were staying busy. Also, the school was massive. I mean, it was there were thousands of students. Um, so when I moved to the Netherlands and started at the IB school, first off, I was shocked by the scale because the International School of Utrecht at that time, we were the first DP class. So it was very small. I think we were with 18 students. It was very new as well. I think the teachers were also still figuring out their way. Um, and we had a lot more freedom in our schedules. So we would have classes a few times a week, but there was plenty of spaces in our timetable for independent study. So one of the biggest shocks, so to speak, in terms of the academic and structural change was that I had free time that I needed to learn how to handle. Um, I think they also stressed a lot more critical thinking as opposed to learning through repetition. So that was something to get used to. But I think I was very privileged in the sense that the international school is in English, and I was already, completely fluent. Whereas I think that was a struggle for a lot of students who moved from non-English speaking countries.
Okay, that makes sense. Would you say that English lessons were different? Since you're American and you speak English since you were born, would you say that English lessons were different from US school?
I was able to take advanced English language and literature and advanced American literature and honors literature classes in the United States. So, in my high school specifically, and in the classes that I took, um, I would say that I was already quite skilled at literary analysis, which seemed to be the focus of English language arts in the international school. So we did similar things, right? Literary analysis as a skill in general, that did not change. I was already quite good at it too. I think what did change was the scope. So, for instance, in my American high school, I had never looked at, for instance, non literary texts. I never looked at magazine articles and had to study them. I never looked at advertisements and had to study them. I never looked at comic books or graphic novels. So, I mean, I had read them, I had seen them, but I never had to work on something like that in an English class before. So that was a change. But if it came to studying a book like Oliver Twist or 1984, for me that was very easy. Um, However, like I said, I was also very privileged given that I went from an English speaking school to an English speaking school, and I didn't, for example, move from a school where I had to speak German or Hungarian or Russian to all of a sudden an English language arts course. But I would just say the kinds of works that we dealt with were much, much, much broader in the international school, uh,
Okay.
as opposed to in my American high school.
Okay. That makes sense. IB schools do take non-literal text too, in the account. But I also wanted to ask about mathematics, since English and mathematics are two subjects that are everybody required to take. Was mathematics any different from US school?
I felt like my mathematics in the Netherlands, well, at least in the international school, was very. It was much easier than what I was doing in the United States, and that's because I joined the year late, so I wasn't actually allowed to select all of my courses. They had determined for me, at least the coordinator of the DP at the time had determined William is joining the year 4 or 5 months late. He'll have to make up a lot of work. They wouldn't allow me to take a higher level math course. So I felt like I wasn't particularly challenged in mathematics in the IB because the fact that I joined late and I wasn't allowed to select a mathematics that was more appropriate for what I was capable of. However, I can say that mm, I thought it was still very well taught, and I thought it was a very good subject. I worked largely with statistics, and I had to do certain projects that I never had to do in my American school. For example, I never had to write a paper about math in my American high school. Uh, that was my, what do you call it?
Internal
Um,
assessment.
my internal assessment. Yeah, I had to write an essay about statistics and do my own research, and I thought that was so cool to me. I thought it was a bit overwhelming at first, but this is like what I said earlier. I think the IB pushes you to think a bit critically, and they give you a lot of freedom to do certain things or certain kinds of projects to explore what you like and what you're good at. And that being said, I had never even thought in my American high school you could write a paper about math. Um, but the IB, for example, although I wasn't in the most challenging class, it was still fun and it was still interesting.
Okay. Since we started talking about subjects, do you remember what subjects did you take?
Yeah, for the most part, my standard level courses were visual arts, mathematics, and Spanish. And then my higher level courses were biology, English, and history. And
Okay.
I believe, is it just 6 subjects or am I missing one?
Yes, that's correct. Six
Okay.
subjects
Yeah.
and extended essay and JOK
Yep.
lessons.
Okay, perfect.
That's correct. And what would you say was the most challenging subject?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think that there were two very challenging classes for me, and they were challenging in different ways. Visual arts, I found very challenging because I wasn't particularly good at it, and I didn't particularly like it either. So I found it challenging to stay interested enough to do the work that was required to do well in the course. Uh, Albeit it was a standard level course. Whereas I took history higher level and I did excellent in history. I did excellent. I found that challenging because I felt like my teacher realized that I was capable and that I knew quite a bit and that I was very eager. So I felt that she continued to push me even though I was already quite good at it. So I would, for instance, raise my hand and disagree with the teacher quite openly and quite frequently in my history class. And she wouldn't shut me down. She wouldn't tell me not to interrupt the lesson. She would engage with me. And we would have little discussions or debates. And I thought that was very interesting. Also in how she graded my essays, for example. I think that she graded me according to what she thinks I could have said or could have done better, and not necessarily only what the rubric said. So that made the class challenging, even though I was already quite good at it. Whereas, like I said, with visual arts, it was challenging because I didn't like it. And I had always wished that I never took it. So those were the two most challenging courses, but in completely different ways.
Would you say you were happy with the subjects that you took?
Largely, yes, but there were, for instance, I took Spanish. I didn't want to take Spanish. I wanted to take Dutch because I live in the Netherlands. I wanted to assimilate faster. I was eager to learn and to connect with people here a bit better. But because I joined the year so late, right, I had moved in the middle of a school year, they assumed that I would have had too much to learn too quickly. So then they knew I already spoke a little bit of Spanish. They said, okay, you'll be in the Spanish class. So I wasn't thrilled with that. I wasn't thrilled with visual arts. I wasn't particularly happy that I needed to take a lower level math course. Not lower level as in uh, it's not a good math course, but lower than what I think I should have been taking. But I was very happy with biology higher level. I thought that was very cool. I liked that we got to do a lot of lab work. I also think you learn a lot of really relevant and interesting things when you take biology because it determines how you live effectively. I liked my history course because it gave me a very different perspective than what I learned in history in my American school. And I did like my English class because, like I said, it was all of a sudden I was working with these different kind of texts. Um, so, if I'm not mistaken, your question was I happy with the classes I took?
Yes.
I was, I would say, because I wasn't truly allowed to pick all of my classes, there were quite a few that I wasn't thrilled with, and I would have chosen something else if I had the choice. But with the other courses, I was very, very happy. Um, Although, frankly, I don't know what I would have picked differently if I did have the choice, because in hindsight, everything is 2020, right? I could say so easily, oh, I would have taken this and this and this maybe, but also certain classes weren't offered when I took the DP. Like I said, we were the first DP course, so we did not have an economics class
Okay.
initially. Um, there was business that did not interest me. Um, but I think now there are certain courses where I think, oh, if we had that back in the DP, I would have taken that for sure.
Since you're saying that, what subjects would you take today if you were coming into DP as a NYP student?
If I myself had to do it all over again and I could pick my own course load, I'll try to answer this question without the benefit of knowing the career that I want to be in now, right? Because I think it's one of the biggest challenges for people who are entering the DP is they feel like that, and they're told by both teachers and parents The classes you pick in the DP will determine what you're able to do in the future. And to some extent, that's true, right? If you take all science classes and or if you, let's say, for instance, you take very artsy classes, very creative classes, and you don't take more technical or scientific or academic courses, then maybe it would be difficult to get into that kind of program later. Uh, but also, students don't really know what they like yet, right? That's part of the exploration. So I think if I had to go back in time and advise my younger self on what to do, I would have I would tell myself to take classes that I'm not sure if I'm going to like, so that I can find out. I think I would have taken also, if I had the choice, some classes that I loved. I would have taken English again for sure. I would have taken history again for sure. I would have taken biology most likely. Um, but I would have taken.
Just in this case, we don't limit you to 6 subjects or like one science or one math. You can take more subjects.
Okay,
Just a desired subjects that you would take in DP.
I would definitely take economics because I think it's one of the coolest subjects ever.
Okay,
I would have taken a more advanced math class. I think there's 4 levels of mathematics now. Um,
that's correct.
at that, frankly, I don't know too well what the distinction is between each level, but I would have taken one of the more advanced math classes because I think it's good to be challenged. I would absolutely have taken history or any other subject that gets you to really look at the globe, right? So I don't know. I think in the MYP, the equivalent to that would be like INS, individuals and societies, um, and I probably would have taken another science like physics
Okay.
because I think that that's really cool. I think that to learn how the laws of the world and the universe work is quite neat. So I would say a combination of social studies like economics and history, and more hard sciences like biology and physics, and then definitely a little bit of English language and literature.
So mostly you would take the subjects that you're interested in and not that you're looking to go to university.
Yes, I wouldn't necessarily pick my subjects strictly based on what I want to do in university, because quite frankly, what I wanted to do in university when I was in 8th grade or in the MYP age is absolutely not what I'm doing now. I
Mm-hmm.
thought I wanted to be a historian, and now I would not like to be a historian at all. Not to say that it's not a good career, it's not for me. Um, I also thought when I was younger that I would go to like a military school for college because that interested me. Now, no way, right? So I think when you are about to go into the DP, I don't think you actually really know what you're going to end up doing in university and what you're going to end up doing for a career. So I think I would have taken things that interested me, that also seemed challenging, and things that I wasn't. I frankly wouldn't be completely sure that that's something I would deal with in the future, but it calls to me and I want to see if I like it. Like physics, for example. I knew I never really wanted to be a physicist or become a hardcore scientist, but I think it would be really, really neat to have been exposed to that and to learn about it.
Okay. Um, Thank you. Let's go back a little bit.
Mhm.
Since you said that coming from the US school and going to IS Utrecht, what skills would you say you developed the most while being in DP?
Oh. Uh, well, I would say that in my time in the DP, one of the first things that I needed to develop quickly was time management skills. Because, like I said, we had quite a lot of independent study periods in our schedule. We also, at this time in IS Utrecht, we did not have enough teachers. So there would be times where during a class, our teacher would do their own work and tell us that we need to do independent study. So we ended up with a lot of independent study time. On top of that, the IB, specifically the diploma program, it's quite a lot of work. There's a lot of assignments, there's a ton of studying, and it always feels like even when you feel like you've done enough, there's always a voice in your head that goes, "Ooh, I still need to work on this," or "Ooh, I still need to work on that." Even if you don't do it, and even if you don't feel like doing it, one of the things that I constantly encountered in the DP was there's always something that I feel like still needs to be done. And that's usually because on my manage back or the program we used to track our work, there was always things to be done. So I think I one of the things that I developed was the ability to plan.
Okay.
So when I say time management, I don't mean that I used all of my time effectively, because frankly, that would be a huge lie. What I learned to do very well was to plan my time. So this is my week. These are the things that need to get done. When can I sit down and do them? When can I make the time? And how can I fit it all into my schedule? I was quite good at planning those things. I don't think I had the discipline at 16 or 17 years old to always follow my plan, but I don't think that means that it was a poor plan. I think I just would get distracted and would prefer to do something else, right? It always sounds easier to study tomorrow, and then when tomorrow comes, you go, "Oh." So I think I was quite good at planning my schedule, planning my studies, although the discipline lacked. Another skill that I think I developed, I wouldn't say developed, I would say strengthened, was critical thinking. And that was largely through the humanities courses and the language and literature course that really, in TOK, for example, the extended essay, these things that really force you to think quite deeply about a subject and to challenge your own assumptions and beliefs and those of others, which I think people need to be able to do in a productive way. I would say critical thinking, time management slash scheduling, and I think one of the other skills, or maybe it's more of a trait that I developed, was personal responsibility, because our teachers did not check our formative homework assignments. We had a difference between formative and summative. Formatives weren't graded, summatives were. A lot of our homework was formative. It was, you do it to prepare for the next lesson, you do it to prepare for the exam, but it's not necessarily going to be checked by your teacher. I learned very quickly that when I did not do my formative work, or if I didn't even look at it, or if I didn't try, I would end up doing poorly on my summative assessments compared to how I would do when I did actually prepare. Also, if you're getting a 4 in a class or a 3 and you're passing, theoretically, you could get a higher mark, but your teacher doesn't make you, right? If you go to class and you're doing your things and you're getting a 4, your teacher is not going to tell you that that's not okay. It's, if you feel like you can do better, if you want to do better, then you have to motivate yourself and you have to discipline yourself. Also, I think just simple things like going back and forth from school on the public transportation and being in a very international environment, being in a new country, attending a new school system, learning how to ask teachers the right questions when I didn't do something right. All of those, I think, were parts of individual responsibility that came with my last 2 years of high school, the DP.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. But what do you think or how do you think did you manage yourself to like pull yourself together and like manage all the workload or all the assignments and the rest? What was the best motivator? What was your scheduling looking like? Um, can you give some advices maybe on that?
So, like I said, I was always quite good at scheduling and planning. I always had a good plan for how I'm going to get everything done this week, but I very rarely followed my plan. And once again, I don't think that's because my planning was poor. I think it was just my discipline really lacked. Um, so, I've always been somebody who works more efficiently. I wouldn't say better, but more efficiently when I'm very stressed. So then I can't afford to be distracted anymore. Then I work really hard and I work very focused. So my procrastination was pretty intense during the DP. Like I had said, I lacked some discipline. When it when I had an independent study, I didn't often make use of it and really do the work I needed to do at that time according to my schedule. But as a deadline would get closer, I was inherently quite good at locking in, so to speak. As a deadline would approach and I would realize it and I would start to feel that stress, I would work very efficiently and I would get things done. I think that's just natural to me. However, I think had I had the discipline that I have now when I was 17, I think I would have done excellent in the DP because I would have actually worked when I said I was going to work and I would have studied what I said I was going to study. But I would say one of the ways I managed to get by, so to speak, was uh, I get anxious quite quick. I have a tendency to get stressed out and anxious when I feel like I'm falling behind. So when other students would say that they've studied, or when the teacher would remind us that the exam is coming up, or a given assessment would be approaching, within a couple of days, I would really begin working and I would begin working hard. Uh, like I said, I think I sold myself a bit short in the DP because that meant stress was my fuel, anxiety about assignments as well. Not getting done on time would be my fuel to actually work once I had procrastinated enough. But like I said, I think had I really stuck to my plan and utilized the time that the DP gifts you, everyone always says there's not enough time in the DP and oh, my assignments are stacking up. I don't have enough time. I would ask them, what are you doing with your independent studies? Because there's a lot of time during the school week to get things done. However, another answer to your question, I've always been somebody who's been more productive at night. I'm kind of a night owl. So if I would have an independent study in the morning, I can assure you I probably never really utilized it ever. When I would go home and I would have lunch or dinner and I would play sports and then I'd shower before bed, I would sit at my desk and I would actually feel like I have a bit of energy and I would work. So I always found a way. I always found a way, largely because of the stress and the anxiety about getting things done on time after I had procrastinated enough. That was my fuel. That was my motivation. However, for certain classes, if I really liked something, I did it intrinsically. I just cared and I thought it was cool. Like for English or for history, I wanted to do those things because I was good at them and I found it a lot of fun. So that's a very rough answer to your question, to be honest. It wasn't very short and concise, but I also sometimes wonder how how I got through it because I wasn't particularly disciplined. But my advice to any student who's going to do the DP would be the more you do at school, the less you have to do at home. And if you prefer to work at home, work at home. If you prefer not to work at home, work at school. But you're going to have to do it at some point. So it's up to you. Um, I hope that's an okay answer.
That's I would say that's a really great answer from you. That was really detailed, and advice in the end is perfect. I was actually gonna ask you about broader advice for IB students, but that was perfect from you. And also, since you graduated a couple of years ago, 7, 8 years,
Mhm.
um, do you think that IB became harder since then? And would you say that overall IB is a hard program to take?
I think I can start with your last question first because I think for me, it's quite an easy answer. Yes, I think that the DP program at the International School of Utrecht, when I attended it, I think it was hard. I think it was challenging. I think what made it challenging is we were all pushed to think on our own, and there was quite a lot of work that needed to be done in order to do well, in order to get the points you needed for your test or for your midterms and whatnot, and your mocks. There was always a pressure. Um, so I do think it was hard. There was a lot of work. There was quite a lot of pressure, and the style of learning was much different than what I was used to in my American school. Do I think it's gotten harder? That's hard for me to say because I've only really been tutoring in, let's say, 2 to 3 subjects since I've graduated. I would say that based on what I've seen, it hasn't necessarily become harder. However, I do think that the school changed quite a bit. And then I don't know if it feels for students more hard than it felt for me. That's something I can't really speak on. But frankly, for certain courses, the content did not change very much. The skills also remained very much the same. For example, for English language and literature, even back when I was doing it, we had further oral assessment, we had paper ones, we had paper twos, we had uh, PETI or PEAL, analysis paragraphs. I think that DP English students are still doing that right now, if I had to guess. We also studied the same. I found this a shame in the International School of Utrecht. Ever since I graduated, I think there's only been 1 or 2 new books introduced to the English language and literature program. I think that's unfortunate because I think it's good for teachers also to practice new content, to teach new things. Number one, to keep their skills sharp, and number two, to keep themselves interested in their own courses. I also think that it makes it a bit, if students know people who have already graduated, who have studied those works before, it can make it far too easy for them because they can simply ask for help and answers. So I think it probably stayed quite similar, is my guess. However, one thing that I cannot ignore is students now have better and more efficient learning resources and tools like AI, which when I was in IS Utrecht, we did not have large language models on our computers. They just didn't exist. I think that for students learning how to use these things and for students who do use them, I don't see any problem with using AI. I think it's about how you use it, of course. And this is the very cliche answer that everyone gives. But I think if you use AI to complete your assignments for you, it can make the year feel like it's going easier, like it's going quicker. I think you'll always struggle on your assessments though. So I think you either bear the pain of doing your assignments on your own and then doing well on your test, or you let ChatGPT or Cloud do your assignments for you and then you struggle on your test. So I think it's you have to pick your poison, so to speak. But I would say that with things like ChatGPT or other large language models, it probably makes the workload a little bit more manageable for students now than what we had what we were used to in 2017 and 2018. But it's odd. I feel like even when I was tutoring last year, students were still learning very much the same things. And I was surprised that there was, for example, not really an AI course or workshops on how to use AI, how not to use AI, and ways to use it very well, because it is a great resource. It helps you learn very quickly too. So it's a very roundabout way to say, I'm not sure if it's gotten particularly harder. I see a lot of similarities. I see more similarities than differences in the school that I attended. And I think that certain technology that we have now or that students have in their hands now makes the workload feel more manageable, but I worry for them that if they rely on it too much, then they'll very much struggle on the assessments and they won't be able to walk away from the IB and say, whoa, I learned a lot, but they'll be able to say, I have a nice diploma. And I think that the hard work is really an investment that you should make.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. AI models definitely impact my study right now, but I wouldn't say that it impacts it as much since I chose the path of doing my assessments myself and then not struggling on the exams.
Yeah,
And so you were talking about how hard work needed in IB and that diploma is not it's in a word, but it's also important to do hard work. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that IB was useful in university and maybe further in your life?
absolutely. Because I think one of the biggest shocks is when so many IB teachers, I think every single diploma program teacher that I had said, oh, you guys think this is hard, wait till you get to university. I did not feel like university was that much harder than the IB. I did not find that my first year of my bachelor program was particularly hard. I was in an honors bachelor program. I was in a difficult course. It's very selective. I did not think that it was much harder than the IB. And I think the reason that I felt that way is I was used to the workload of the IB. And I think that was very similar to how the workload of my university program was. That's not to say that all university programs are equal in terms of workload or difficulty, right? But mine, which was supposed to be a quite difficult program, and it's known as being a difficult program, wasn't much more difficult than what I went through in the IB. And I think that the critical thinking skills that were required in the IB, the critical reading skills, also very critical reading skills, and the time management skills that I had to develop in the IB to get through it very much benefited me in my university education. I think also just that's all just school stuff, but outside of that also my university program was also very international. It was extremely international. Uh, I found that my interactions with students at the international school made it very, very easy for me to meet friends with to meet and make friends with people from all around the world who were studying in the city of Utrecht for their bachelor's, also for the master's program too. I would say that the IB definitely prepared me for university well. It also set my expectations very well. Having time in your schedule where you have to fill it with something, or maybe you plan to and you don't, right? But in university, you're not expected to be there all day. No one's checking your attendance. No one's checking your homework. It really comes down to if you're interested in it, or maybe you're not interested, but are you going to do the work that's required of you to, number one, pass your course, right? Because you're paying for it. But number two, are you willing to put in the extra work to ensure that you're really, when the time the course is done, you're going to be able to walk away from it and go, I got my money's worth, right? I learned something. I satisfied a curiosity. I gained a skill. I acquired knowledge. Um, I think that the skills that I had to develop in the IB definitely allowed me to experience those things and do quite well in university. However, some of my shortcomings in the IB were also shortcomings in my bachelor program. So I think I also planned my schedules very well during my first years of university, but that was also my first chance to party and hang out with people from, who went to different universities, and it was a very different life experience. So I definitely made use of it. I had a lot of fun. I didn't always do the work I planned to do. Sometimes I would tell myself that, I have 2 hours after my lesson on Friday where I can study before I go have fun. Well, when everybody's walking out of the building right after class ends and they say, come on, let's go get a drink, are you going to sit and study? I didn't have the discipline to. So I ended up having to do it on the weekends. But yeah, I think that I was definitely trained to do well in university by attending the IB. And there was a huge difference. I really mean this. There was a very, very big difference in how well people did who were from international schools. There were only a few. There were also European baccalaureate schools. The people from the IB and the EB in my university program did quite well on average compared to the people who did not. And that's not to say that we're better or we're geniuses, but I think we were all much more used to writing in English and thinking in the way that the IB prepares you to think for university. So we almost had a little advantage. It's not that we were inherently smarter in any way. We just were more used to it. And you saw that in how students performed.
Okay. And then probably my final question would be, are you happy or do you regret that you took IB?
No, it was I didn't have a choice, right? I moved to the Netherlands and I didn't speak Dutch, so I couldn't go to a Dutch school if I wanted to further my education. Uh, so it wasn't really a choice, but I loved it. I would not have wanted it any other way. Even if I was completely fluent in Dutch, if my parents were willing to put me in an international school, I would do it all over again. And I would do it better. If I was in the IB, yes, I would still have a lot of fun. I would play games with my friends in my independent studies, but I would just try 5% harder or 10% harder to be a little bit more disciplined. And I think I would have walked away from the IB with even more uh, skills, knowledge, abilities, probably new curiosities as well. Um, but for anyone who says in the IB, work as hard as you can at every moment, no, don't do that. Have some fun. It's a chance to meet people from all around the world and learn so much more than just math, reading, critical thinking. You learn how to interact with people from different cultures. You you learn that no matter where you're from in the world, whether you're, right now, you and I, we're you're a Russian, I'm American. There's huge geopolitical differences between our two countries. Yet, by attending the IB, one thing you realize pretty quickly is, wow, we're all just people. Like, and people can get along with each other, and that's something that's very eye-opening. So I definitely think that if a child is able to go to the IB, it will make a very, very, very big impact on their life in a very positive way. And this isn't me trying to sell international schools. I stand absolutely nothing to gain from more people going to an IB school. But I think it was very, very, very important for how I learned and developed into the person I am today. So if someone ever said to me, I'm deciding right now between whether I go to an international school or a different kind of school, my first advice would be do what you think is right. But my second advice would be go to the international school, because I learned so much in mine. I thought it was great.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Then that was good. Thank you so much for this interview, and yeah.
Yeah, no worries. I'm happy I was able to help.
So, thank you for watching this video. I don't know if some of you actually finished it. I think that video contains important information about the changes from American school culture and international school culture. It also introduced IB very well, because the Will talks about basic stuff such as subjects and like how interesting they are and what would he personally like to take based on his interests. He also gives good advices, so I hope that some of those advices are actually helpful to MYP students. And I would say just thank you for watching this, and I'll post further interviews with other students and graduates in soon. Thank you for watching this. Thank you.